You're cutting my salary to 41,000. That's the first thing I said, loud enough that the air in that conference room changed. Patricia Kellerman didn't even blink, just folded her hands like she was about to lead a board meeting. 3 other suits sat around that polished table wearing those neutral expressions that scream corporate damage control. I barely knew their names. She slid the paper toward me like it was some kind of gift. It's part of a strategic restructuring, Brady, across all departments. I'd been seeing the warning signs for months. Meetings I used to run suddenly got moved without me. My lab access got restricted to business hours only. Equipment started disappearing from my requisitions. Budget approvals that used to take 2 days were suddenly stuck in review for weeks. Then came the blame game. Missed benchmarks, contaminated samples, quality control failures, all landing squarely on my desk. Thing is, I knew I hadn't screwed up. They were freezing me out, one calculated step at a time. I didn't grab that paper right away. Just stared at it. 98,000 down to 41.8. This wasn't restructuring. This was a message. I held Patricia's gaze steady. Let me think about it. She tilted her head like she was genuinely surprised I didn't immediately start arguing. One of the suits finally spoke up. Some guy from finance, I think. We're hoping you'll stay, Brady. We know this is a tough ask. I gave him a tight smile. Yeah, real tough. Then I walked out. My name's Brady Walsh. I'm 45, been working industrial chemistry for over 20 years. Got a 12-year-old son named Tyler who's dealing with Crohn's disease. Medical bills eat half my paycheck, even with insurance. The pay cut wasn't just insulting. It was designed to make me quit without severance. Here's what Patricia and her team didn't understand about my situation. I'd been with VitaClean Industries for 8 years. When they handed me the industrial sanitization division, it was dead weight nobody wanted. Sales were garbage, client complaints constant, the whole product line practically discontinued. I rebuilt those formulations from scratch and turned that division into their top revenue generator. We went from $3.2 million in annual sales to $21.8 million in 4 years. Not bad for a guy they were now trying to lowball. The real breakthrough work happened in my basement lab. Nights after Tyler was asleep, weekends when he was at treatment appointments, me down there with test tubes and pH meters, solving problems VitaClean's corporate R&D couldn't touch. Most industrial cleaners focus on single applications. Either they kill germs, or they cut grease, or they handle mineral deposits. I developed integrated formulation systems that addressed multiple cleaning challenges simultaneously. My crown jewel was a quaternary ammonium surfactant blend with specialized pH buffering that remained stable at 18 to 22 degrees Celsius. Cold water cleaning that maintained 99.97% pathogen elimination, while cutting heating costs by 42%. Real money for any industrial client. VitaClean didn't even know this formulation existed. They were still pushing the same lukewarm enzyme blends they'd been selling since the Clinton administration. Meanwhile, I'm down in my basement creating next-generation sanitization chemistry, documenting everything with timestamps, keeping receipts for every piece of equipment I bought with my own money. My division controlled 34% market share in enzyme-based industrial cleaners, maintained full EPA DFE certification, ensured ASTM D1173 compliance on everything we shipped. I wasn't some lab technician following cookbook recipes. After that meeting, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. My hands weren't shaking. My heart rate was steady. Because I'd seen this coming for months, just didn't expect them to be so clumsy about it. They figured I couldn't afford to walk away. First mistake. I drove straight home, didn't stop anywhere, didn't call anyone, pulled into my driveway and sat there staring at the garage door. Tyler was upstairs doing homework when I came in. Kids develop sharp instincts about reading situations. Probably comes from spending half his childhood in medical waiting rooms. He glanced up from his math problems. Everything okay, Dad? I ruffled his hair. Just work politics, buddy. Nothing we can't handle. He nodded and went back to his equations. Smart kid. Gets that from his mother, though she's been out of the picture for 3 years now. Later that night, I went down to my basement lab and started pulling documentation. Every formula, every test result, every innovation I'd developed after hours using personal equipment. Video logs with timestamps, purchase receipts for reagents and glassware, lab notebooks with dates and times clearly marked. I even had Tyler in some of those videos, sitting at the workbench eating cereal while I ran stability tests on surfactant compounds. All the proof anyone would need that my real breakthroughs happened on my time, with my resources in my space. I grabbed my employment contract and read it like my life depended on it. Found the clause I'd skimmed years ago when I was grateful just to have the job. Company intellectual property includes all work produced during designated hours on company premises with company resources. There was my opening. Every significant breakthrough that mattered, the cold water enzyme complex, the multi-surface quaternary blend, the biodegradable surfactant system, all developed off the clock, off their property, with equipment I'd purchased myself. Right then, I realized Patricia and her team thought they were playing chess. Problem was, they didn't even understand what game we were actually playing. Next morning, I called Neil Rodriguez. Neil Rodriguez is a patent attorney out of Columbus who specializes in chemical intellectual property. Sharp guy, no nonsense, the kind of lawyer who actually understands the science behind what he's filing. I'd heard his name at industry conferences, knew he'd handled some major wins against companies trying to steal formulations from smaller players. Neil, it's Brady Walsh from VitaClean. I need to talk. He didn't waste time with small talk. What's the situation? I gave him the basics. Employment contract, basement lab, documented timeline, everything. He listened without interrupting, which told me he was taking serious notes. Can you get me copies of everything? Videos, receipts, lab notebooks, the works. I told him I could have it all digitized and sent over by end of business. Good. Don't discuss this with anyone at your company. We'll meet this weekend. Saturday morning, I drove to his office with 3 banker boxes full of documentation. Neil spread it all out on his conference table like he was assembling evidence for trial. Took him 2 hours to go through everything. Finally, he looked up at me. This is bulletproof. Every major formulation clearly developed outside their walls, documented timeline, personal equipment receipts, even your son as witness in some videos. They can't touch this. We spent the next 3 hours mapping out patent strategy. 3 provisional applications under 35 U.S.C. 111B, the federal statute that establishes priority dates. Cold water enzyme complex, multi-surface quaternary blend, biodegradable surfactant system. Filing fees, attorney costs, documentation review came to $8,400 total. I wrote the check without hesitation. Here's the thing about industrial cleaning patents, Neil explained while we worked. They're tricky because most formulations are incremental improvements on existing chemistry. But what you've done is create integrated systems, much harder to work around. He showed me the patent landscape on his computer. Hundreds of applications for individual compounds, but almost nothing for networked cleaning platforms. Your documentation shows clear innovation paths. This isn't just tweaking existing formulas. While Neil handled the legal side, I started making other calls, quiet ones. Raymond Nash headed R&D at TechFlow Solutions, VitaClean's biggest competitor. I'd met him at the American Institute of Chemical Engineers conference 2 years back. Solid reputation, respected results over politics. We'd stayed in loose contact the way people do in specialized industries. Raymond, it's Brady Walsh from VitaClean. Got a minute to talk? His tone shifted immediately. You don't get calls from senior people at competing companies unless something interesting is happening. Always have time for you, Brady. What's on your mind? I gave him just enough to get his attention. Intellectual property situation, possible availability, established track record in industrial sanitization. Are we talking about you personally or your entire division? Just me right now, but I've got proprietary formulations that could change how the industry thinks about integrated cleaning systems. Naturally, this got his attention. We set up a video call for the following week. I made it clear this had to stay confidential until certain legal matters were resolved. Raymond's been around long enough to read between those lines. The patent applications moved faster than I expected. Neil's office was efficient and my documentation was comprehensive. Within 10 days, we had priority dates established on all 3 formulations. More importantly, we had freedom to operate analysis showing no conflicting patents in the field. Even if VitaClean tries to challenge these through inter partes review, they'll have a hard time, Neil told me. Your timeline is clean, your innovation is documented, and you've got independent development clearly established. Then came my video call with Raymond. I walked him through the formulations without giving away specific compounds or ratios. Showed him performance data from my basement testing. Kill rates against E. coli, Salmonella Listeria, all documented under AOAC 960. 09 testing protocols. Cost reduction metrics, temperature stability data, surface compatibility across stainless steel, polypropylene, ceramic substrates. You developed all this in your basement. Raymond was studying spreadsheets that showed 42% heating cost reduction with maintained pathogen elimination. Every drop, I told him. Personal time, personal equipment, personal breakthrough. He leaned back in his chair. Brady, we'd kill to have someone like you here. I'm not just talking about a position. We need a senior director who can think beyond individual products. The offer came 2 days later. Senior Director of Chemical Innovation, $165,000 base salary, 12% annual bonus, full R&D budget authority. But here's the key part. I kept the patents. TechFlow would get exclusive licensing, but ownership stayed with me. That's unusual, Raymond admitted during our negotiation call. But your track record speaks for itself. We want the innovation, not just the formulations. Meanwhile, I spent those days playing it careful at VitaClean. Showed up on time, attended meetings, acted like someone who might actually consider taking their insulting pay cut. Patricia kept checking in, probably expecting me to cave under financial pressure. How are you doing with the transition proposal, Brady? She'd ask it with fake concern, like she actually cared about my situation. Still thinking it through, I'd tell her. Tyler's medical bills make everything complicated. I need to make sure I can still handle his treatment costs. It wasn't entirely false. But what Patricia didn't know was that TechFlow's executive health plan would cover everything. Plus, I'd be making almost twice my original VitaClean salary. Tyler started asking questions around this time. Kid's observant. Dad, why are you working late in the basement again? I thought you only did that when you were figuring out new stuff. I was actually cleaning out my lab, documenting final test results, preparing samples for transition. Just wrapping up some projects, buddy. Making sure everything's properly recorded. He nodded, but I could tell he sensed something bigger was happening. The cleaning process took 3 nights. 20 years of accumulated research, development notes, prototype formulations, all of it carefully cataloged and backed up. I kept detailed inventories of what belonged to VitaClean versus what I'd developed independently. The distinction was crystal clear, but I wanted documentation that could survive any legal challenge. By the end of that week, everything was ready. Patent applications filed and approved, new job offer signed, transition timeline mapped out, legal strategy confirmed with Neil. Patricia and her team assumed they were pressuring me into accepting their lowball offer. What they didn't realize was that I'd already moved 3 steps ahead of their entire game plan. Time to show them exactly how wrong they'd been about having me cornered. Walking back into VitaClean headquarters exactly 1 week later felt different. Same lobby, same security desk, same elevator music. But this time I wasn't the guy getting cornered in conference rooms. This time I had a manila envelope under my arm and leverage they couldn't imagine. Patricia's assistant saw me coming and stood up like she was going to intercept me. I've got a meeting, I told her without slowing down. But she's not expecting. I pushed the boardroom door open. 7 people inside. Patricia. 2 guys from legal, including Catherine Walsh, who handled IP matters, Douglas Reed from operations, and 3 executives I didn't recognize. Didn't matter. I walked straight to the head of that table and dropped my envelope right in front of Patricia like I was serving a subpoena. Licensing proposal, I said. $4,200 per month total. Exclusive terms, immediate implementation. Patricia didn't touch the envelope, just sat back and crossed her arms. You don't own anything, Brady. Everything you developed falls under company intellectual property. I opened that envelope, pulled out the patent documents, and spread them across the table like I was dealing cards in Vegas. Actually, I do own them. Filed, approved, documented. 3 provisional patents covering every major formulation your industrial sanitization division depends on. Catherine Walsh leaned forward and grabbed one of the sheets. Started reading the technical specifications. Cold water enzyme complex with quaternary ammonium stabilizers. Multi-surface compatibility system with pH buffering. Biodegradable surfactant blend with thermal optimization. Douglas Reed tried the intimidation approach. This is a stretch, Brady. You use proprietary company data in some of this development work. We can tie it back to VitaClean resources. I stared him down. You can try, but if you push this fight, discovery is going to get messy for you. Pretty sure your email servers still have Patricia's messages about quietly phasing me out before third-quarter earnings. That's just the beginning of what we'll find. Patricia's expression tightened, but she kept quiet. I wasn't finished. Just so we're clear, this isn't a negotiation. I've already accepted a senior director position at TechFlow Solutions. Start date is Monday. These licensing terms are exclusive to VitaClean. You've got until Friday to sign the agreements. After that, they expire and TechFlow gets full market access. The room went dead quiet. One of the unknown executives picked up the cold water enzyme documentation, started reading performance specifications. If this formulation works as claimed, we're going to lose half our profit margin without it. The numbers were right there in black and white. 42% reduction in heating costs, 99.97% pathogen elimination, stable performance across temperature ranges from 15 to 35 degrees Celsius. Catherine Walsh spoke up. What exactly are the licensing terms? I had those memorized. 6% royalty on net sales for each formulation, $75,000 minimum quarterly guarantee regardless of volume. Multi-surface system is $1,850 per month base fee. Cold water complex is $2,100 monthly. Biodegradable surfactant line is $1,250 monthly. Non-negotiable. Patricia finally found her voice. Her tone was low and controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. We made you, Brady. You don't walk away from everything we invested in you and hold us hostage like this. I leaned in, kept my voice steady. No, Patricia, you underestimated me. That's different. She stood up, like that was supposed to rattle me somehow. You've got Tyler to think about. His medical situation. What happens when your new job doesn't work out? At that moment, I smiled. Couldn't help it. What happens when your board finds out you let the company's most valuable intellectual property walk out the door and handed your biggest competitor full market access? Nobody had an answer for that one. Douglas Reed tried a different angle. Are you open to annual licensing instead of monthly payments? I shook my head. Monthly keeps you honest, keeps me in control. You want stability? Don't try to screw me next time. Catherine Walsh was still reading through patent documentation. The innovation timeline is comprehensive. Personal equipment receipts, off-hours development, independent testing protocols. This would be difficult to challenge successfully. She glanced up at Patricia. The IP claims appear legitimate under current employment contract language. One of the younger executives asked about implementation timelines. How quickly could we transition to licensed usage? I told them integration would be immediate. The formulations were already in their production systems, they just didn't realize I owned the recipes. Your current inventory uses my patents. Every gallon you've shipped in the past 18 months incorporates my intellectual property. Suddenly the real panic set in. Douglas Reed started calculating potential liability exposure. Retroactive licensing fees, patent infringement damages, legal costs if this went to court. How far back does the patent protection extend? Neil had prepared me for this question. Priority dates go back 24 months from filing. Covers your entire current product line and most of last year's inventory. Patricia tried one more approach. Brady, we can work something out. Maybe we were too aggressive with the restructuring proposal. We could revise the salary adjustment, find some middle ground. I packed up my patent documents, slid them back into the envelope. Middle ground was $98,000 a year for the guy who built your most profitable division. You decided that wasn't good enough. Now you get to live with the consequences. I walked to the door, turned back one final time. For what it's worth, Patricia, this could have been avoided. All you had to do was treat people fairly. I left them sitting there with licensing agreements and calculators, trying to figure out how much my revenge was going to cost their quarterly earnings. Didn't even make it to Friday. They called Wednesday afternoon. Catherine Walsh on the phone, trying to sound professional while basically surrendering. We're prepared to execute the licensing agreements as proposed. When can we schedule signing? I told her Thursday morning, 10 a.m., bring corporate checks for the first quarterly minimum guarantee. Done deal. By Thursday evening, I had signed contracts and $75,000 in guaranteed licensing revenue. Patricia was conspicuously absent from the signing meeting. Word around the office was she'd been called into emergency sessions with senior management. Turns out losing your division's core intellectual property doesn't look good on performance reviews. Friday was my last day at VitaClean. Cleaned out my office, said goodbye to the few colleagues who weren't part of Patricia's inner circle. Alex Carter, one of the junior chemists I'd been mentoring, pulled me aside. This place won't be the same without you. Think there might be room at TechFlow for someone who knows reaction kinetics better than cookbook chemistry? I smiled and handed him Raymond Nash's business card. Tell him I recommended you. Just don't mention it to anyone here until you've got an offer letter. Monday morning, I walked into TechFlow Solutions with a briefcase, a clear conscience, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd outplayed people who thought they were smarter than me. Sometimes the quietest moves make the loudest impact. Time to build something better than what I'd left behind. Walking into TechFlow Solutions on my first day felt like stepping into a different universe. Real lab equipment, proper ventilation systems, budget approvals that didn't require 3 signatures and a blood sample. My nameplate was already on the door, Senior Director of Chemical Innovation. Not the kind of title they give you when they're planning to phase you out. Raymond Nash introduced me to the team during the morning meeting. 15 engineers, all sharp, no dead weight. Brady's going to be leading our integrated systems development, he told them. He's got patent ownership on formulations that are going to change how this industry thinks about cleaning chemistry. I could see the respect in their faces. These people cared about results, not politics. The first project was obvious. Take my individual patents and build them into something bigger. Not just better chemicals, but a complete platform that would make traditional cleaning systems look like stone tools. I called it the TechFlow Integrated Cleaning Platform. Smart sensors that monitored contamination levels in real time. Automated dosing systems that adjusted chemical ratios based on temperature, surface type, and soil load. Temperature-responsive formulations that optimize performance while minimizing waste. We ran pilot tests at 3 facilities: Midwest Packaging Corporation, Industrial Foods LLC, and Regional Medical Systems. The results exceeded my projections. Cleaning time reduced by 38%. Water usage down by 45%. Energy costs dropped by 51% because we weren't heating water unnecessarily. Labor costs decreased because the system practically ran itself once you program the parameters. Regional Medical exceeded Joint Commission standards with 0 citations during their next inspection. The facility director called me personally. "Brady, this system is remarkable. We'll never go back to manual dosing." Industrial Foods cut their sanitation downtime from 4 hours to 90 minutes. When you're processing perishable goods, that's pure profit. Midwest Packaging saved $180,000 in their first year, with a 14-month payback period on the system installation. Around this time, Tyler started commenting on changes at home. I wasn't working nights in the basement anymore. Wasn't stressed about budget approvals or political games. "Dad, you seem different," he said one evening while we were making dinner. "Kid's observant." "Different how?" I asked. "Like that camping trip when you fell asleep looking at the stars." "Relaxed, I guess." I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was right. For the first time in years, I enjoyed my work instead of fighting through it. 6 months into the TechFlow job, my licensing income from VitaClean was running about $10,000 per month. Combined with my salary and bonuses, I was pulling over $300,000 annually. Tyler's medical expenses weren't even a consideration anymore. Executive health plan covered everything, plus I'd started a college fund with an initial deposit of $85,000. Kid was showing real aptitude for chemistry, got accepted into the advanced program at Cincinnati Science Academy. Industry publications started paying attention. Chemical Engineering magazine featured our integrated platform on their cover. American Institute of Chemical Engineers invited me to speak at their national conference. The title of my presentation was Beyond Individual Products, Network Chemistry for Industrial Applications. Standing room only, questions for 45 minutes after my talk. People wanted to know how we'd achieve such dramatic efficiency improvements. But the real satisfaction was watching VitaClean struggle. Without access to my formulations, they were trying to compete with chemistry that was essentially obsolete. They lost 3 major contracts to TechFlow in the span of 2 months. Their stock price dropped 18%. Patricia got quietly terminated during what they called organizational restructuring. No press release, no goodbye party, just gone one day like she'd never existed. Alex Carter called me during this period. "Brady, they're falling apart over there. 6 chemists quit last month. The new division head doesn't understand the science. Just keeps pushing for cheaper formulations that don't work. Any chance TechFlow has openings?" I told him to send his resume to Raymond. 2 weeks later, Alex was part of our team. Sharp guy, just needed proper guidance instead of cookbook procedures. The acquisition talks started in month 8. TechFlow's market share had grown from 8% to 23%, mostly at VitaClean's expense. Their board was desperate to stop the bleeding. Raymond came to my office with preliminary numbers. "They want to sell," he said. $52 million cash plus $15 million earnout over 24 months. "What do you think?" I told him VitaClean was worth maybe half that a year ago, but their distressed situation made it a buyer's market. The due diligence process took 6 weeks. VitaClean's books were messier than I expected. Revenue declining, client complaints increasing, R&D budget slashed to almost nothing. Their trading multiple was down to 0.7 times revenue. Classic distressed asset territory. But they still had manufacturing capacity, an established sales network, and some decent people trapped in a dysfunctional system. TechFlow closed the acquisition 3 months later. I got appointed director of R&D for the combined entity, reporting directly to Raymond. First thing I did was call an all-hands meeting with the remaining VitaClean chemists. Same conference room where Patricia had tried to cut my salary. This time I was standing at the head of the table, addressing people who'd been abandoned by their previous leadership. We're not doing things the old way anymore, I told them. If you're here to collect a paycheck and hide behind bureaucracy, this isn't going to work. If you want to build something better, you'll get every resource I can provide. But we're done with the politics and blame games. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others sat up straighter. The ones who stayed turned out to be exactly the team we needed. Tyler visited the new facility a few weeks later, brought along Ranger, the rescue dog we'd adopted when his health stabilized. Kid walked around the labs, asked intelligent questions about equipment and procedures. "Dad, you're really the boss of all this now?" I nodded, something like that. He scratched Ranger behind the ears. "Cool. Think we can get him a friend?" I laughed. "Let's see how he handles this place first." The integration took about 6 months, but the results spoke for themselves. Combined revenue up 43% year over year. Employee retention improved from 67% to 91%. We filed 12 new patents in the first year, created an innovation pipeline that actually served customers instead of just generating paperwork. Looking back, Patricia's salary cut was the best thing that could have happened to me. She thought she was delivering a punishment. Actually, she was handing me the motivation to build something better than anything I could have created while staying comfortable. Sometimes you need someone to try to break you before you realize how strong you actually are. The quarterly licensing checks still arrive from the old VitaClean formulations. About $40,000 every 3 months, plus my director's salary, plus bonuses tied to company performance. Tyler's thriving. Symptoms under control, grades excellent, already talking about chemical engineering programs for college. Kids got real talent. Not just book smarts, but the ability to see connections between concepts. I keep that original salary reduction letter in my desk drawer. Not because I'm angry about it anymore, but because it reminds me that sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as the worst possible news. Patricia and her team thought they were playing hardball with a guy who had no options. Turns out they were just showing me exactly how much better things could be somewhere else. The chemistry industry is not that big. Word gets around when someone makes moves like this. Other companies have reached out. Headhunters call regularly. Industry conferences treat me like someone worth knowing, but I'm not looking to move again. We're building something here that's going to last, and Tyler's got the stability he's never had before. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead.